All right, so welcome to all of you who are coming on now. And we're shifting from the essential low back training to the Restore Your Prana training. And I just want to give a little shout out to my dear friends here, Ellie Rose, who was just here. Oh, there you are. It just flipped where you were. So Ellie Rose, who has been a long time, very dear student and friend of mine, excellent, amazing teacher and person. And she's actually done, I think, almost everything I've taught. And she's here to talk about the Restore Your Prana and her experience with that program. And then Tamara Gillette. Hi, Tamara. Long time no see. Tamara, also long time student who's done all of my training programs and is also, like Melissa and Llewellyn, a Buteyko practitioner and has taught Restore Your Prana and been a mentor in the RYP program, along with Llewellyn and Melissa, who are also mentors in that program. So I invited them to come and share from their perspectives. And then welcome to all of you who are here and interested in this program. Let me just start by asking of the students here, as in, I know many of you are teachers and therapists as well, but those of you who are here to considering applying for this program, how many of you have read my book or watched the Restore Your Prana 10-hour training workshop, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Workshop, what do we call it online? The online workshop, 10-hour workshop on Restore Your Prana. Okay, so not so many of you. A little, you've been introduced to it right through Yoga North, right, Danielle? Okay. So I've written 2 books on the breath. Restoring Prana was the primer, and then Melissa's holding up the Svadhyaya Breath Journal, which is the companion workbook that takes the practices from Restore Your Prana, puts them into journal form, kind of really breaks them down, details them out so that you can take yourself into deep practice. This is a lot of information. I've been told it's a little dense. It's a lot of information. And as I say at the beginning of the Svadhyaya meaning self-awareness, self-study, breath journal, because it's really about you studying your own breath. As I say in the intro to that, you can read this book and never practice, and you'll get some information, but nothing will change. And you cannot read this book and you can do all the practices in the Svadhyaya breath journal and your entire life will change, I guarantee you. If you change your breath, your life will change. So I'm a big believer in it's all about the practice. And the Restore Your Prana program starts with you doing the practices. There's just no way in my understanding of breath, and I've done the work myself, so I know from whence I stand. You cannot teach breath from a place of theory only. And there are some very important physiological pieces that you need to learn to really understand breath work and do it intelligently and safely. That said, it's you putting yourself under the microscope of awareness and really watching and observing how your breath impacts you and how every single choice you make, whether it's in thought, speech, or action, sleep or no sleep, what you eat, how fast you eat, how often you eat, like everything, every relationship, like you start studying it, you notice that everything impacts the breath and the breath is impacting everything. So when I say, if you change your breath pattern, you will change your life, it has to be that way because the breath and the nervous system and the mind are like this. You cannot separate them. So if you change one, you're going to impact them all, which is the essence of pranayama. And if you look at the 8 limbs of yoga, pranayama, pratyahara, then dharana, dhyana, samadhi. If you can't quiet and settle your breath, right? Good luck quieting and settling the mind. Good luck. I mean, so, right? So learning how to, again, assess where people are at the beginning, like how they are breathing most of the time. We all have, just like we have postural patterns and we have movement patterns, you all know this, right? You're sitting the way you're sitting. Is it familiar? Legs crossed, leaning to one side, right? Right? Have you done this pattern before? Have you sat this way before at least 100 cajillion times? Yeah. So guess what? We breathe 30,000 times a day. Multiply that out by your whole life. And if you even just don't like, just suspend disbelief and just say, okay, Robin said everything affects the breath and the breath affects everything. So everything in your life has affected your breathing and cultivated the pattern of breath that you are now implementing in this moment. That's having a huge impact on how your mind works, how your digestion works, how your immune system works, how your cardiovascular system works, how your reproductive system, like really everything, for sure your lymphatic system, like, right? There's no separation, which is why pranayama was such a central part of yoga practice, because the yogis, they say, like, if you do asana, like, great, like you'll have more, whatever, you'll have more strength, you'll have more flexibility, you'll be able to move better, but you work with the breath, your physiology and your mind changes. Like, it's right there in the teachings. If you want to change the mind and you want to become healthier, physiologically healthier, you have to work with the breath, because the breath, it's sort of like the central conductor of all the other physiologic systems. So how we breathe matters. And just because we breathe away in a way all the time that's really familiar and comfortable doesn't mean that it's optimal. And I learned this the hard way. I learned this by being, without knowing it, a highly dysfunctional breather from birth. And then through major childhood upper respiratory illnesses that were brought on by diet, not breastfeeding and being given formula and like drinking cow's milk. Like I shouldn't have had all that. I was like one of those kids, back in the day that was probably lactose intolerant, gluten intolerant, like should not have had any of that stuff. But that's what was, my parents were like trying to do the right thing. That's what was being told. Like, if you're a good parent, you have your kids drink up, 3 glasses of milk a day and whatever. So they were just trying to be good parents that way. But the result was I was sick all the time, like all of the time, all respiratory stuff, ear infections. I had adenoid, tonsils, strep throat, everything. And I coughed and I coughed and I coughed and I coughed. And nobody diagnosed me with asthma. Nobody gave me an inhaler. I just coughed all day, every day. And nobody said, this is actually really violent and damaging, and you're like tearing up your internal organs. But now 4 surgeries later, I can tell you that's the truth. Nobody should be left to cough like that. So it wasn't until then I found yoga, and yoga was like, I started getting healthy for the first time in my life, and it was a miracle, and I loved that. And then I started teaching yoga, and then I started teaching more yoga, and then I started teaching trainings, and I was teaching those for hours a day, hours and hours, days at a time. Then I guess, what happened? Started getting sick again. I started coughing again, and I was unable to stop coughing. The final straw was 3 months. I got a respiratory infection, 2015, coughed for 3 months straight, couldn't sleep. Husband had to go in the other room because I was just keeping him awake. And I went finally to my naturopath. I was doing lots of pranayama, lots and lots of pranayama. What I thought was pranayama, what I was taught was pranayama, big, deep breaths. I was so hyperventilated, I can't even tell you. I had been over breathing my whole life. And then like, it was like a funnel, like so much breath that I was dying from it, from too much breathing. It was killing me, literally. I had no energy. I hurt all over. It was just like I was before yoga, before I started practicing. Brain fog. chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, all the symptoms that I had had prior to yoga. And I kept trying to breathe it better by breathing more. And then I went to see my doctor and she said, Robin, you have asthma. She gave me an inhaler, which was nice, helped curb the cough, but it didn't make me feel any better, just helped me to not cough so much. So then I went to see my friend and longtime student who had alleviated her asthma symptoms, lifelong asthma symptoms, doing this breathing method called the Buteyko method. And I called her and I said, well, I've been teaching you yoga for 20 years. Apparently you have to teach me to breathe. And what she taught me in that first class was to stop breathing so damn much, to shut my mouth and make my breath quiet and less and lighter. And within 24 hours, I started feeling better. And within a week, 75% better. And I thought, I need to know what the heck is happening, because I spent 30 years studying yoga and doing pranayama and believing I was doing good things and teaching other people and saying, if you have health problems, do this, it's going to help. And now I'm breathing the opposite way I was taught, and I'm actually getting healthier by the second. Like I could feel my prana energy coming back, restoring prana. It comes from the inside, that title. I realized that's what was helping. What was happening is I was refilling my pranic reservoir that had been so depleted. So I started studying, and I went to Ireland and I studied with Patrick McEwen, who is one of the leaders in the world of Buteyko breathing. And then I was inspired to bring Patrick several times to do the training at my studio. So I sat through his week-long training like 4 times. And I said to him, I have to understand the science, the physiology of this so that I can teach this to my colleagues, my friends who are yoga teachers and yoga therapists. We've got to stop what we're doing with the breath. Oy vey, it's a problem. We're making people sicker. And he said, I'll support you. Like, write the book, I'll help you. So I sat down and I wrote the book. And then I published it, Restoring Prana, at the very end of 2019. And you know what happened in March of 2020? COVID. And then George Floyd became the year of the breath. And James Nestor wrote his book, Breathe, and came out the same time as mine. And all of a sudden, everybody was talking about the breath, and people were talking about long COVID. But actually, back then in 2020, people were talking about COVID and how to prevent COVID. And there was always, like how to stop the transmission. And I had my eye on the long COVID people because I felt like I knew them. I knew what that was. And I was very concerned that people with long COVID were then going into yoga classes where they were being taught to do Kapalabhati and Vastrika and big breathing. And they've just come off of this illness where they'd been coughing and maybe on ventilators, and their whole breathing pattern, even if it was functional before, had become dysfunctional. And nobody was helping them to get to basic function and get their biochemistry, their breath chemistry balanced. And I was very concerned about it. So I started talking about this to people, and I did a forum for a yoga therapy day that August. And nobody was really paying that much attention. And then I was asked to participate in February of 2021. I was asked to co-organize an international forum on long COVID. Wellness After COVID was what it was called. And I worked with Give Back Yoga and the Minded Institute. And we created this program. There were 500 people from around the world who participated in it. We had doctors, we had all kinds of different kinds of therapists. They're talking about COVID and long COVID from a variety of different perspectives. And it was really successful. We addressed a lot of the different, very complicated issues around that. And then I I was like, I have to create a program to educate yoga teachers and yoga therapists to really get this out there. So, and I didn't want to do it. I mean, at that point, everything was virtual anyway. Besides, I wanted to do this in a way where I could reach out internationally. Like it, doing the symposium made me realize, like, okay, let's use technology to communicate across the continents. So I developed the program along with my fabulous mentor team, who I cannot tell you have just been fantastic. And we've had graduates from various places in Europe, of course, across the States and in Canada, but also in Southeast Asia. And the people who come through the program say it's been life-changing for them first and foremost. And then they just love sharing this with other people and watching the results, watching how well people become as they become more aware of how much their breath impacts them and are able to make wise choices around how they breathe and how to regulate their breath. And it's a lot of what I do in my work with people. I work with a lot of people with autoimmune conditions, and which is, from the yoga and Ayurvedic perspective, a chronic deficit issue. So it's imperative to understand how prana works in the body. And so my book is a real blend of Vedic science and Western science. I'm a and both person. I think there's really wonderful knowledge to be gleaned from both. And when you put them together, I love it when they're saying the same thing. And when I learned the Western physiology, and then I went back to the original teachings of yoga, the original teachings of pranayama, not what my teacher of this generation is teaching, but what the original teaching said about pranayama. And there's no question. The prescription for pranayama is breathe less. Breathe less, not more. So I am going to now close my mouth, breathe lightly, recoup my prana, and leave some space for Ellie Rose and Melissa and Tamra and Llewellyn to share about their experience with the program and their process, their own process of learning via the breath, and then open it up for questions. Ellie Rose, let's start with you. Oh, and
Hello.
Diana, of course, and Diana's here too. Yes, thank you. Yay.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Llewellyn. I'm sorry. Llewellyn was my mentor. And I just want to say, oh my gosh, what a beautiful, I get verklempt, compassionate mirror that she was for me. This work is so intimate. It is so deep and subtle. And I kind of didn't have any idea. I had hopes, but I didn't really have any idea what to expect. It came at the perfect time. I had the time to do the program and take my time to do the program because you can't really push this. There's nature. You must respect yourself every day. But what I didn't realize, I just knew I started falling in love with it. And I was teaching yoga teachers. So while I was doing the program, about 5 months in, I started teaching it, which really like forced me to dig in deep. I'm like, I have to have I have to have been through this deeply. So that was wonderful kind of support behind me to commit to every morning pranayama practice. When I first met Robin, I could not sit still. This was 22 years ago. I had so much anxiety and I was praying for stillness and peace. And I did everything, I did the pranayama she taught me at that time, which she doesn't teach anymore, but it sort of helped, but it didn't in the long run. But I started doing the program and I committed to a daily practice. So morning is the best time for me to do my practice. So I just committed, I created a sacred space, which totally helped to have a designated space. And immediately, within 2 weeks, I started feeling more grounded. And it was so subtle at first, but I was like, at first I thought it was, am I sick? Like, this doesn't feel like me, but it was good. I started running with my mouth closed. I started working out with my mouth closed unless I was, and it was unbelievable. My dental health is so much better from not mouth breathing. My anxiety is so much better from not mouth breathing all day long. But it really took about 6 months for me to start. I was experiencing in the nervous system level what I had read about in the ancient texts, and my teachers had told me, the 8 limbs, Gianna. I was experiencing some samadhi. And it was regular. The space after the exhalation where you drop in to a stillness that I had only read about. And when you do the practice and you increase that time where you're in this utter beautiful emptiness where your nervous system is what you've all read about. And when I finished the program, I had an amazing awakening to the subtle level of energy and my own prana and others. And it just continues to unfold. I have my breathing when I get into situations when I'm triggered, and I can settle my nervous system down within 5 minutes. And it's the most loving, beautiful thing you'll ever do for yourself is to give your breathing. It's like the source of your whole system, like Robin said. It's like getting to the source of all imbalance. So, and I couldn't have done it without Llewellyn and the Sangha of people, because everybody's on their own path. So it's such a beautiful gift to be in a group of people while you're going through this journey, because you do need the support. So many new things will happen. You'll like, what was that? And so I bow to Robin and Llewellyn. Thank you so much. It has forever changed my life. And now I do crystal Reiki healing. That's where it led me from. So the energy of crystals, it's just this beautiful awareness of the subtle energy of all of life. And it's beautiful. And I've never been more grounded in my life. And when I go away and I'm not, I have a way back all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the book is,
companion.
yeah, that's enough. Yeah. Yeah. And the book is intense, and that's why you need the group too to get through it. But you want to know, especially if you're thinking of teaching teachers, they can hear the Western science. They want to hear that, because if they're not used to the yogic perspective, especially like lay people that you may work with, they have somewhat of an understanding. It's a language they speak. So having both and seeing how they harmonize is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellie Rose. And I just I don't think you'll mind if I point out that when we met way back, whenever that was, long, long time ago. So at that point, Ellie Rose was doing an Ashtanga yoga practice. It was all like intense asana, right?
Of course I was.
And now she's doing crystal healing, right? So like watching this transformation in her and coming more and more into her own center and trusting and just being, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And intuition,
Yes, for
like
sure.
right there, like right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So thank you.
That's the trusting. And I feel like when we are able to tap into our subtle body, and the only way to do that is going in through the breath. I mean, the breath is there. It is what feeds and fuels the subtle body. So the process is like a roadmap in to that realm. Thank you. Diana, would you mind sharing your perspective as a student and now grad, right? You're a graduate?
Soon to be.
Soon to
Almost
be.
done.
Yay, almost done.
Almost done, yeah. So from a personal perspective, like Robin said, and like Ellie said, it's been life-changing, definitely. And it really got put to the test because my mom, who was 97 at the time, which was last year, had a double stroke and went from being totally functional, totally independent and autonomous to all of a sudden very, very high need caregiving. So, so it was very, very interesting and very serendipitous to be doing this course at the same time, and it assisted me greatly. Like I don't think I would have managed it, quite frankly. I think I would have burnt out without the prana practices that I learned in the course and was using. So on a personal level, it's been amazing. From a professional, I'm a physiotherapist, yoga therapist as well. First of all, Robin, your book is like incredible. I have written chapters for books, and so I'm kind of a little bit knowledgeable on the process of writing. And I don't know how you did it, but it's absolutely brilliant. It's worth its weight in gold. And yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a go-to manual. What I loved about it too was it was the first time that I actually understood all the yoga teachings that I'd studied that I couldn't quite understand on prana and how they get integrated. Became so clear when I read the chapter on that. It was like, oh my God, like a light bulb went off. So thank you for that. It was just brilliant, brilliant. So the book with the companion workbook, I just can't say enough. I mean, if you did that alone, it probably would change your life. But doing it in the course, having a mentor, I have Aggie Stewart as a mentor. She's just absolutely another one. It looks like all your mentors are brilliant.
They are.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So
brilliant and also so committed and heartfelt
brilliant.
and giving. Like yeah, I feel very blessed.
Yes, yeah. So I had a similar experience to Ellie with Llewellyn, that I just felt really supported, and not just for the course, but even personally as I was going through one of the biggest crises in my life. So it was wonderful. And I was already teaching a curriculum of courses on integrating yoga into healthcare, and had not realized like how significant this was as a missing piece in what I was bringing to my colleagues. So I started that before COVID. And then, of course, COVID hit. So there was a little bit of a lull, but I probably have taught over 1,000 colleagues in the courses that I've taught so far. But it's when I started to integrate the breath stuff into them that, oh my God, then they were just so totally incredibly impressed with that. So I'm going on to develop a course that's part of that curriculum. And I've already taught it to several groups, both yoga teachers and to just lay people, yoga practitioners and whatnot. So I've already integrated it quite a bit in the teaching to people. So it's been fantastic for that too. So I think that's about it, unless there was something else I left out.
Thank you. I so appreciate your perspective and how wonderful the work that you're doing. That's fabulous. Good for you and good for all of the people that are being able to benefit from your expertise and the way that you're interweaving all of this information and knowledge together. Yeah. I mean, that's what we need, right? Right, Sangeeta? It's the integration, not to be competing, but like, wow, you know this, you have this to offer, and I have this to offer, and put it together. Like we have so much more. My dad was a scientist. He was an oral pathologist. And so I think I grew up with that kind of respect for science. One of my favorite playgrounds was on Saturdays when we would get to go to the lab and hang out and look under the microscopes and play with. Anyway, so that's just part of me, and I do see the lacks and the gaps in Western medicine, but I also see that there's so much good wisdom and knowledge that we've accrued by being able to do this kind of micro testing and really getting into what actually physiologically is going on. And it's never the whole story of a human being. So let's bring all that wisdom together. That's my intention. And it came together so beautifully with the breath work that there was no, once I saw that everybody was saying the same, everybody who knew a whole bunch, like, and have the creds, was essentially saying the same thing, then I could say, okay, then I understand then why I'm having the experience that I have when I breathe less as opposed to more. It's right here. It's all right here. There's something that got lost in the translation of pranayama down through the ages, but we can rectify that. It's just misunderstanding. We can learn more and be more educated, and then bring that forward until there will be a tipping point. That's my hope. I might not be alive to see it, but there will be a tipping point where we get back to the original teachings of pranayama and teach people how to breathe in a functional way. Tamra, I'd love to hear from you, all the way from France.
From France. Wow, it's lovely to be here, Robin. Thank you. I started with Robin when she brought Buteyko into the yoga therapy practice. So, like Robin, I grew up with asthma and lots of problems going on. But so the story here is this practice helped straighten all that out, similar to Robin. It changed my life completely. But what I learned and what I teach as a mentor is the compassion part. The yoga therapy training was very trying. It was a lot of work. Robin really drills it into your head. But what she taught me out of that training is how important it is to be compassionate. And when you embark on this big of a change, changing your breath, because it's hard, you have to become so passionate with yourself. And it really starts with you. And learning how to just love where you are right now. Because if you can't do that, it's really hard to change. It's hard to take your breath in another direction. The intertwining of the mind and the breath and the body and how your systems behave together, it becomes really clear to you when you start changing the breath. So it really has changed my life. I worked at Microsoft when I started my Robin's program, and I was a little high strung, right, Robin? And now I live in the south of France. But I didn't.
See how your life can change? If you do this program, you might end up living in the countryside in the south of France too.
That's right. But I mean, more importantly, I left Microsoft way before that, and I did build a lovely yoga therapy practice, and I do sound therapy, but it has truly changed my life, and so I love giving this to other students. It is so interesting to watch changes in people's lives, and I've changed my family's life. Sometimes I get a little crazy because I can't stop talking about it, but it is pretty amazing. I'm a skier. I go from sea level to 10,000 feet with no problem. And people are like, don't you have high altitude sickness? I never get high altitude sickness because I breathe right. I think that's really the only reason. I can go do a 6-mile hike right off the bat, right when I get to 10,000 feet, flying from sea level. It's been truly remarkable. I'm a skier. I'm very athletic. So doing the breath right, you're going to become even better at all the things you love to do. So how good is that? So I don't know what else you want me to say, Robin.
That's awesome. I'm going to actually, I know, couldn't we all? But thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know what I'd like to do now, and I know Llewellyn and Melissa have a lot to share as well, but I just would like to open it up to those of you who are here with questions about the program and to speak to your interest in it. And if you have specific questions for me about the delivery of the program, there's more to the program than just the books and the mentorship, and we can share some of that, what else you get with the program. But let's hear from you about what's percolating inside of you regarding this, and as you listen to us share about the wonders of the breath. Yeah, Donna.
What's percolating for me is I did start the Restoring Prana webinar. And
That's what it is, a webinar. That's the word I was looking for.
so I got to the first practice of lessening your breath, found it really challenging. And there was all kinds of talk going on.
Oh yeah.
And at the moment, I am also it's a question of timing. I am um, in the middle of an advanced pranayama course, through Gary Crafso, and I'm wondering about, mm, how the two mix. Like, is it the best of timing to go in one direction versus the other, or do they really complement each other?
Well, I haven't studied with Gary for many years. So I don't know what, if anything, he's done different with the breath or if he's still teaching what I learned from him. But while I have deep respect for Gary and so much appreciation and gratitude for what I learned from him, which is vast. He's without a doubt been the most influential teacher in terms of how I teach and my understanding, but more in relationship to asanas and the Yoga Sutras. I've left behind his orientation towards the breath. And I'll just say it this way, because it doesn't hold up Vedically or respiratorily. Like there's still aspects of his orientation that I hold, but in terms of the way that I would and do introduce breath to people is not the way I learned from him. I feel good about that choice for myself. So I would say that there's probably major differences in orientation.
Okay.
Yeah. Diana, is there something that have you studied with Gary? Is there some perspective you can bring to that?
So Donna, I did the level 1 course, which I'm assuming you had done before this advanced one.
Right.
So having almost finished Robin's certification, what I can say is Gary's course was very interesting, and I wanted to see it kind of more from the yogic perspective, sort of what had been taught in the past, like what was considered traditional for his lineage. It kind of misses on the fundamentals that people don't breathe properly to begin with. So I found that what he was teaching all had relevance. It's kind of hard to follow. It was quite complicated, especially when he got to all the Kumbhaka stuff. You probably found the same, but it's all very relevant. But I think it's relevant to people who have a foundation of appropriate breath, appropriate functional breath to begin with. So what I find in contrasting the two is that they merge well, but it's kind of like Robbins is like the foundation, like complete foundation, with then some advanced stuff that she does later on in the course. And then it's kind of like his stuff, it would be kind of added on later if somebody wished to even go that route, you know? So I don't know if that helps in some way to put it a bit in perspective in relation to the course that of Robbins.
It does. Again, I just then wonder about midstream doing both.
Yeah.
What that would feel like to me.
You know,
So,
Johnny,
for example,
you and I can talk about like timing and start time, like when you finish that course or whatever. Like I'm more of a one thing at a time person to just not overload systems. Again, it's all about prana and allocation of energy, which I think is really important that we all examine and make wise choices around. So I would encourage you that way, and I'm happy to work with you on that. I appreciate your perspective, Diana. I think that's where I got into trouble with it, because I I'm a super good student, and that if I trust the teacher, and like I'm going to go and do it, and I'm going to do it a lot. And so I didn't, and nobody, none of my doctors, none my naturopath, like nobody that I had ever worked with, or my yoga people, teachers, you know, my yoga influencers had ever suggested that I was a dysfunctional breather to begin with. So I didn't understand my baseline. So doing the big pranayamas exacerbated what was already an underlying problem. And then when I got sick, it was like, you know, perfect storm. But it's that piece that I would like the prana. There's nothing wrong with the pranayamas, but you have to understand who's in front of you. There's nothing wrong with twisting, but you have to understand who's in front of you. There's nothing wrong with backbends, but you have to understand what is the starting point of the person in front of you. Is what you're asking them appropriate and within the capacity of their system? Is it going to support and nourish health and well-being, or is it going to push them over the edge? For me and for many people, the classic pranayamas, traditional, nice to understand and know them, and Gary knows them better than anybody else that I know out there in the world. And that's why I really do trust and have looked to him as a source for information on that. But the piece that was missing was this: not most people don't come in, especially post-COVID. Most people are not coming in as functional breathers because they've been on high stress mode for a long period of time, which has reset their breathing pattern. And so we need to get people back to function before we start doing fancy manipulations of the breath this way or that way. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Others with questions? Yes. Jamie, I see you.
Yes, hi, thank you. This is great to hear everyone's perspective and get some information. I am also a yoga therapist. I went through the Maryland University of Integrative Health program, and that, although I wish I had more study around the breath, I think we had maybe one course in that program. And so I did get your book and started reading that, but I really would like a community to study with. With that being said, I am also a reading teacher. I'm a reading specialist, and so work with a lot of students. And so I'm curious if this is something, you know, I don't know, as far as I'm interested in, you know, myself, because I love the study about yourself, the embodiment of the breath work, and then be able to teach that to others. And I do work in a studio, but I'm curious how that would work with working 40 hours a week, and then also if it does kind of translate where I can work with children as well.
So let me start with the children piece. So yeah, if dysfunctional breathing often starts in childhood, or it can be brought on by, you know, a chronic health issue or a crisis, motor vehicle accident, or some kind of trauma, psycho-emotional trauma that resets the breathing pattern, like you were doing fine and now you're not. But oftentimes it can start in childhood, like it did with me, and Tamara as well. And so my teacher, my breathing teacher, Patrick, he also grew up with a lot of issues, was diagnosed as having ADD and doing poorly in school. The man has written, I think to date, 9 books. Like he is one of the most, Ellie Rose, you like mentioned Samadhi, like the man just is so present. He's nowhere but here. Like he's I introduced him to yoga, like he never did a yoga class before he met me. And right, but really he's like the most profound yogi that I know. And it's all from his breathing practice. But he was a dysfunctional breather as a child. And the point I'm making is that he orients so much of his training towards how we can reach out to parents and teachers and help to get children becoming functional breathers from the outset. High levels of anxiety, we're seeing sleep apnea, bedwetting, like behavioral issues. So many of these things can be triggered by dysfunctional breathing patterns, and getting people, little people breathing well can do so much to bring that back into balance. And so that's a big piece of his training. And some of the people that I've trained, like you, are already integrated in that world of early childhood education and are very or parents, and have that very close to their heart. So for sure, learning how to bring this to children. And one of the women who, she's no longer a mentor in our program because her life just got too busy. A lot of what she does is working with kids and working with a functional orthodontist in the area, and they collaborate together on helping to get this. I mean, I've had reconstructive jaw surgery. That's one of the many surgeries that I've had. Still have appliances in my mouth, all from my dysfunctional breathing pattern. I actually just saw a scan. I just want to say this to you guys. I just saw a scan 2 days ago of where my airway is now relative to where my airway was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago when this process started. My airway 2 years ago, like, if you're like, what are you seeing? There's no space. That's what you're seeing, no space. Like literally, I saw the scan. There was tiny, like a coffee stir. And then in the middle, there's complete occlusion. There's no space. And then a little bit more of a coffee stir. And now my airway is the size of a big gulp straw. So, I mean, the shift, but I wouldn't even have known that was a thing, right? When she diagnosed me, she said I had a 200 times more likelihood of dying at night from a stroke or a heart attack because of lack of oxygen. I only had mild sleep apnea, but it was just, she's like, if you didn't do, she's literally, my airway doc said, if you didn't do the breathing that you do, she was aware of my book and the work that I do. She said, you'd probably be dead. I don't know how you breathe because we're looking at your airway vertically. When you lie down, there's less space. So I don't understand. I mean, I'm glad you're alive and you're breathing, but I think it's because you're doing this breath work. So anyway, there's a lot of information and knowledge here. And yes, please take the course and teach kids. Please, please, please. We need that. Get them while they're young, right? It's so much easier. My granddaughter learned how to change her mouth breathing pattern in 2 weeks. You know how long it took me? Let's just say longer, old dogs takes a little longer.
Well, Robin, I definitely know that going through your course will help me, because I do know that I'm probably sway towards the hyperventilator as well. And so that's something I'm very interested in as I get going in the program. But just by you confirming that piece of it, I work on a Texas Education Agency initiative, working with mental health practices and academic instructional strategies. So I go out across the state of Texas through many districts. So this is, it will be so impactful. And that's what, when I was in just a staff meeting, and we were talking about work productivity, and we discovered together that it's really more about the breathing. You're going to get more work completed efficiently if you're breathing. So
you get more oxygen to your brain if you're breathing functionally.
Yes. So anyways, thank you. And then I definitely was curious about the balance of working full time and then also doing the course, which I think will help me with my own work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but it sounds like it's doable.
Yeah. So this program, I would say, unlike the yoga therapy training program, right, is much more doable while working full time. And so it's done it's organized to be self-paced, right? That said, you do have to stay on it. You do have to, and the mentors are really good now with helping people to like set up schedules for themselves and work with time management issues so that each week I'm doing this much each week, like in carving out the time and space. I mean, you do, if you just like, it's going to happen, it probably won't, right? You do have to actually say, okay, every Tuesday afternoon is my Restore Your Prana time to go through the practices and the practicums, right? And I'm going to do my daily practice every day from this time to that time or whatever, so that you really are staying on it. And then you'll succeed. And some people, a lot of it's hard to say because some people come in with a lot of the yoga background and the understanding of the Sanskrit terms, and they've been introduced to the philosophy. And so those chapters are like, interesting. I'm glad Diana, she felt like were well written or whatever, but like it's review. And for some people, it's brand new, and they're like looking every other page. They're in the Sanskrit glossary going, what was this term? What, right? And then there's the medical terminology, right? And the chapters on physiology, which are, you know, for some people, a big slog. And for other people, you know, coming in, I imagine Sangeeta, you know, like, okay, piece of cake, right? You can sort of just do a quick review of those things, right? Because you've been educated in this area, but a lot of yoga teachers haven't been educated in this area. So some chapters need more time, some chapters need less time, and the mentors help you with that. In addition to the practices in the program, each chapter has practicum, where you take the big essential pieces, key components of that chapter, and wrap it into some kind of either like a little elevator speech that you write, or a little teaching vignette that you record, so that you get to practice the skills, not just like, oh, I really get this for me, but how do I communicate this and convey this to other people? And it's each chapter as it's layered in with a little more education and then a little more education. So by the end, the final practicum is putting together a 4-week breath course where you're utilizing all of those tools and, you know, and really getting your mouth around, right, and your head around how to communicate the yoga science and the Western science to really help people to understand their own breathing patterns and how to transform them. Yeah. Yeah, Klaus, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I have the question. So I heard it's self-paced. So that means I don't have a problem with time zones, right? Because I'm in
Right.
Germany. It's not a
No,
problem.
we've had lots of people in Europe taking the program, and then Tamara's there. So, I mean, all of our mentors have been accommodating wherever people's time zones are. We just make it work. But now we have a ambassador right there in Europe, so that makes it even easier.
And what was the question? Yeah. Are they live sessions as well, or?
Yeah. So the program basically uses the Restoring Prana book as the manual, and the Svadhyaya breath journal as your way of tracking your own practices and communicating to your mentor about what your experience is with those practices. We have an online platform called Canvas Instructure where everything is uploaded. And that's where and how you'll communicate with your mentor in written form. And then you'll meet with them once a month via Zoom or whatever and talk about what's going on with your practice. And maybe they'll give you some personal practices in addition that they think would be customized and adapted best for you. And then in addition, once a month, I run an RYP Sangha that's, like everything else, recorded. So we do it live, and people who from any of the cohorts, any of the alums are welcome to that. And oftentimes I'll pick the brains of the mentors, what's coming up with their students right now that seems like it could use a little bit of deeper exploration. I do a little spiel, talk about that, or I invite the students to bring their questions forward. So it's interactive. And then I usually, the last part of the 90-minute session is me taking people through a practice based on whatever the topic was or the topics were that were discussed in that session. And so I had one student graduate who teaches for a huge organization, teaches yoga to teachers like in Southeast Asia. She has a great impact on everywhere from Hong Kong to Singapore. She's teaching everywhere in that area. She's from North America herself, but she could never make it live to the sessions. But literally, like as soon as she woke up the next morning, because she was sleeping, the first thing she would do the next day is sit down and watch those sessions. And she said she felt like she was part of the Sangha that way, right? Like that she still stayed connected and hearing other people's questions and other people struggling with some of the things that she was struggling with, and then my addressing them, that even though she wasn't able to be there live, she still felt like there was that connection to this greater family of people working with the breath this way. So so there's that. And then in addition, there is an auxiliary folder that comes with this program that is made up of something like 30, 35 different videos, PowerPoints, additional learning processes, practices, multiple practices with me, guiding the integration of the different concepts with the breath throughout. And again, it's organized chapter by topic. And so that's something that only people in the RYP program get. And the people who use the auxiliary folder tell me it is a huge, huge gift, and that it really helps them to understand, to see how I bring these ideas into an actual practice, and how I talk about them, and how I weave them into asana, and how I use it to like take people in the direction of meditation and see it filled out so that it's not theory, it's being modeled. And then there's, like I said, little tutorials on assessment, breath assessment, and other things. So those are also part of what you receive with this. So it's multidimensional that way. And while I just want to say, while it is self-paced, there is a shelf life. The mentors cannot be on call for people for years on end. So it's suggested 15 months with an option for a 3-month extension. Most people are able to complete the program in that time. Sometimes people have issues that come up, family member gets sick or something happens and they have to move or whatever, and they put the program on pause, and we're open. We always work with people like, okay, let's just pause it for the next 3 or 4 months until you're back steady on your ground and ready to move forward. If people need an extension beyond the 18 months, we have an option to hire the mentors directly for that. It gets to be a little bit of a bookkeeping nightmare to just keep trying to do it through the program. But we do our best to accommodate people, while at the same time encouraging them to, while it's spacious, to also stay really steady on it to get it done within that 18-month time frame.
Okay, but the access to the material I have lifelong, or is it
yes,
only?
Actually, yeah, you get the recordings for all of the past Sangha sessions, which now is going on like 3 years. There's so much. And Melissa, bless her, has gone through and actually organized them so you can go, oh, in this session, Robin talked about this, or in this session, she talked about that. And that's the piece that I don't understand and I want more of, as well as the auxiliary folder. All of that, yours for life. I'm not putting a shelf life on it because I really want people to be able to return and review and to refine their understanding of this. It's important. It's really, really important.
And one last question: what is it? What we get more? You mentioned it that we get more material than when we are only working with a book for us alone. What is it exactly?
The auxiliary folder, the access to the mentors, and the Sangha, the monthly Sangha sessions.
Yes, I see.
Those are the things, and it's a lot. It's a lot of additional material that if you're just taking yourself through the workbook, you're not going to get.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm aware of the time. I see your hand, Sangeeta. I want to address your question. I want to thank everybody who was here, has been here for the Restore Your Prana, for coming, and thank you those of you who are coming on now for the yoga therapy training. I'm going to take Sangeeta's question and then we're going to switch over. If this isn't over, if you have more questions, just email me, okay? And I'm happy to discuss with you. If you'd like to chat more or hear more from some of the other mentors, they would, I'm sure, be happy to respond as well. I know Llewellyn and Melissa, you didn't get to share, and you have a lot to share from mentors' perspective. So thank you. And Sangeeta?
I just have one question to clarify. What is the prerequisite for you to start the pranayama training? Like me, I'm a very beginner student and yoga teacher training. Do you need to have a set asana practice before you move on to pranayama, or
Oh,
How you
no. I think that's an actual unfortunate misunderstanding. Again, I think if you're coming from the perspective of sort of like teaching pranayama practices, pranayama techniques, then yes, having some baseline is important. But if you're teaching functional breathing, everybody needs this. I would say first get people's breath regulated and get their nervous system regulated. And then when you take them into asana, they'll have actually a more successful experience with asana as well. They go together. So there's no separation, you know, movement impacts breath, breath impacts movement, and both impact the mind. So it's all in the same, they're all in the same boat together. But for sure, with my orientation, there's no need to have, I work with people with COPD. I work with a lot of people with long COVID, with respiratory issues, pulmonary fibrosis. These people are not practicing asana, right? But they can learn to breathe in ways that help them to function better, feel better, have a higher quality of life. Yeah.
And in terms of prerequisites, there's the RYP 10-hour webinar and the quiz, right?
Yes, and there is the workshop that I have coming up in October, Understanding Pranayama, which will lay out some of the basic foundation materials. Yeah, so that's another option. And also for colleagues of yours who weren't here and you think, oh, so-and-so might really be interested in this, have them come to the Understanding Pranayama workshop, the masterclass in October. I think that's the 27th, Sunday afternoon. And you're welcome to join as well. All right. Thank you, everyone. And